I'm Leroy Jones, and I'm Troy and Amy's grandfather. And I was born in 1924 near Sauk Rapids in a farmhouse. And in those days, we had outside toilets. When wintertime, I used to throw matches in the paper or the bottom to keep warm on the bottom. And I never knew my real father, but I had an exciting life when I was that age.
You have any siblings? Siblings?
Oh yeah, there was 13 of us to feed, and we were extremely poor. And that was in hard times, the Depression, and my father, foster father, was on welfare, so that saved us from dying of hunger. And they used to give us, I can remember, not oranges, but what are those? Grapefruit. And my mother had never seen a grapefruit, and she didn't know how to cut it. And there was some neighbor boy over there, and he was laughing about people that didn't even know how to cut grapefruit. And so my mother asked him, well, how did they cut it? So she learned how to cut grapefruit from then on. But I remember that the sandburrs were just terrible. I got them in my feet and so on and so forth. And we built rubber guns in those days to fight in our forts and tip chairs in the house and so on and so forth.
You talked about hiding in a box and doing some of the
Oh
crazy
yeah,
stuff.
okay. And so one place we moved in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota, we would take cardboard boxes and put them on the street, so the old Model Ts and so on. Mostly Model Ts in those days would miss the box coming down the road and see if they could hit them. We did so many dangerous things. And then we'd put string across the road with tin cans on each side of the road, and the cars would come and hit the tin cans and drag down the road and rattle like crazy, and we'd get a big kick out of that. And when I was about 5 years old, I used to catch the trains from Sartell to from Sauk Rapids to Sartell, and I was hardly able to jump from one car to the other while it was going, and we knew that there was a switch engine and come back the same way, so we'd catch a ride up there and back. And those days there was no police that, like during the Depression, was on the train to keep the kids off. So we risked our lives many, many times. I don't know how I ever grew up, but as I said before, that I'm so thankful that we had 3 daughters, because if I had been me, I'd have killed the boys. I used to go in the Mississippi River swimming, and I'd pretend I could swim because I really couldn't. And they could tell that I couldn't swim, so they grabbed me and threw me in and said, swim or drown. And I had to dog paddle back in to shore. I made it, fortunately. But and I was in the current too, so it was amazing that I ever lived through that. Nobody could have saved me, but anyway, I didn't lie about being able to swim anymore.
Where'd you go to school at?
Oh, I went to school in Sauk Rapids, and we had changed school so much that I got behind. And because we were on welfare, we were us kids were pretty much ostracized because we weren't treated very well. Anybody on welfare was kind of draped. And I remember once that we were in a restaurant walking downtown, and somebody called us in and gave us a hamburger and milk. And that was the best hamburger and milk I'd ever tasted. And my folks were just so angry when I got home. My mother was. It was, didn't want to be thought of as accepting welfare or thought of accepting something. But anyway, I used to run down the street, and they had pears and apples on the street in those days, and I'd run down and fast as I could run and grab one and then eat it on the way so they couldn't catch me. And then the movies were a nickel, and we'd all get together and save our pennies to get a nickel together to get one person into the theater, and then he'd go down and open the exit door. So we'd sneak in the movie from the front and sit in the front row so we didn't miss a flick of the movie. And I should have been a criminal instead of a good guy, because the way I was brought up was not very good. But as I grew older, we moved to a farm. My foster father's dad died and left $10,000, so we moved to Anoka, Minnesota, and they bought a farm. And then I was about 8 or 9 years old, and back just before we moved, we used to dive in a quarry, a granite quarry, and this friend and I that were diving off the granite quarry, he ripped his belly out on a piece of granite just before we left, and that gives you an idea of why I shouldn't be alive. Things that we did. I don't know if our parents didn't know or couldn't control that many kids, but anyway, and that reminds me, on the same granite quarry in the wintertime, we'd go over the white ice was rubber with a sled, and it was just bending down when we'd go over it. And wintertime, so that's what I said is, it's a good thing I didn't have boys, or I'd have killed them, because I risked my life thousands of times. And
Okay.
but anyway, we did farming.
I was just going to ask you what kind of jobs you had on the farm and
Oh,
stuff.
farm. I never worked at home much on the farm, because I worked out since I was 12 years old on neighbors' farms, and I did work for an older couple. They were wonderful. You want to answer the phone?
I'll get it.
You can just pause for a second. I should have just unplugged it. She shouldn't answer it.
Yeah, I didn't get to tell you, I also built I built a sled with ice skates.
Okay.
Right? Okay. I should have mentioned too that I built a cross and then put the clamp ice skates on it, and in the wintertime we'd go across the quarry. I made with gunny sacks for a sail, and it really actually worked. I made it so the back sled could turn, and I was ingenious at that age, really. But
So you worked on other people's farms and...
yeah, I was okay. I worked for a family named Johnson, and they they were very nice, and they cooked wonderful food. I finally got to eat all I could eat, and all I wanted, but I worked for them for 2 or 3 years, and doing corn and driving horses, and we had a couple of horses of our own, and we had I think 16 cows, and the cows provided us with the milk, and we had a engine that pumped the cold water into the milk keeper. That we had a tank that we put the cold milk in until the milk truck come. They had 10-gallon cans that they loaded in those days on the milk truck and hauled it around, and they're antiques now. And then I got a job. When I got about 12, 13 years old, I got a job with a guy named Guy McPhee. And there he had 30-some cattle, and I cleaned all the barns, and I made $2 a day, which was as much as my father was making. And that was from like 4 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And it didn't give you much weekend, but I saved enough up working for him. I bought a suit to go to school, and enough clothes to go to school for high school, and then helped out with the family because our family was extremely poor. And after the second year of working for him, I bought a 32 Pontiac that I drove to school because we were 7 miles, 1 mile from the country school, which we walked to school. And we had what we call a puddle jumper for plowing the fields, and that puddle jumper is a cut down car with 2 transmissions, so you could low speed vehicle that you could plow with, and a harrow and so on and so forth. When I was working for the Johnsons, this guy was probably my age that I am now, the owner of the farm, and he had some horses in the spring that they're always like to get out in the pasture. The cows or the horses, they all run wild. Well, I'd go out cultivating the corn in the spring, and one horse was just wild. So he came out, and when he could see that the horse wasn't settled down, and he unharnessed the horse and had me get on it, just left the reins on, and the horse bolted and took me back to the farm. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get killed. He went over the fence. There's a wooden gate that was into the farm pasture, and he went wide open right over that fence and took me down into the pasture. And there was a slough with water in it down below, and I was pulling for all my life on the rein to pull him to the left, and then he made a quick turn and he threw me off into the lake, in the swamp. So the old guy tied up the horse on a long rope, and he gave him a whip every time he'd go around the corner to calm him down. And he was going, USOB, USOB. And I never forgot that. He was a great old guy, but he finally died. So then the boys got me a job. They had 2 boys 30 years old, which I thought was so old and over the hill. but they got me the job on the highway, and at 20 below zero, I was shoveling salt by hand. They didn't have those twirlers on the truck now that just place the salt evenly. You had to do it by hand, shoveling. So I worked there for a couple of years, and in those days I had odd jobs that I could do for different people. And I took a job mowing along the highway, and I was making $2 a day. And my father thought that that was unbelievable, that I could make more money. In those days, the trains, people going for jobs, was just covered. You could hardly see the train. It was just covered with men traveling to Dakota for the harvest and for a job. It was a very, very desolate time. I also, at about 8 years old, my mother had a double-barrel shotgun, and she let each one of us go out hunting for rabbits and whatever. And I always got to hunt because I was the best shot. So I would shoot pigeons and rabbits, and can you imagine somebody out with a double-barrel shotgun at that age? Oh, the shells were too expensive, to let anybody go shoot. If you weren't going to bring back home something, you didn't get to go hunting again. So I was always very careful of what I shot and how I shot. And that's how I come to be a pretty good shot. And we had the fun with the neighbor kids. They'd bring their horses over in the wintertime, and we'd race the horses out through the cornfield bareback. And it's a wonder we didn't. Our horses would go down once in a while and slip. Oh.
When'd you meet Grandma?
Well, I bought a 32 Pontiac, and when I was working for Guy McPhee, that was the second year, so I was really wealthy. I had saved about $80, and so then I was sitting with Lorraine's brother in the car at high school waiting to go into school, and I saw a girl go by, and I had seen her before a number of times at school, and I didn't know who she was, and I said, I wonder who that girl is. I said, I sure would like to meet her. She is so pretty. And Lawrence, her brother, looks at me and he says, that's my sister. And he's so disgusted. and like nobody would care about her. and I knew him before I knew her. And so finally, somebody on the farm had told her that my brother and I were really nice guys, and that they were farm kids, but they were nice. And so we finally met at a high school basketball game. I used to put on shows, athletic between the games, because I was good at tumbling and good at boxing and good at so on and so forth, and the kind of thing. So I got where Mark Klanowski was our coach. He's a big Polish guy. Of course, most of the neighborhood there is Polish and German. And he would tell me to run. We'd put in slides and ropes that you'd climb down from the gymnasium onto the floor, and then you'd go through barrels and so on and so forth. And I lived 7 miles out of town, and I had by far the best record of going through this unit, but apparently my car wasn't working that day, or I'd run out of gas or something, and so the day we were put on the big performance for the high school team, I had run 7 miles to town, and so my time was down, and he asked after the performance what happened, and I said, well, I had just run 7 miles to town. He just shook his head. He understood then that we were poor people, we couldn't afford transportation, so it was kind of funny. And then I had drank some donuts, and I thought milk was cream, and I got so sick I thought I had appendicitis or something, so they took me to the doctor after that. But I came out okay. But
So you and Grandma started dating after that time, and
then we Grandma and I did start dating, although I was going a couple of times with other girls, because one of my German teachers, I can't remember his name, but no matter, but he said, Jones, you would be one of my best damn students if the girls would leave you alone, because we were in the hall and there'd be a half a dozen girls that was, wanting to get my acquaintance or so on. And I had a car. I think that was the attraction. But anyway, I met some of them later on class reunions. Thank God I married Lorraine, because they were huge. They got to be big, big women. And anyway, one invited me and my brother out to the farm, their farm, their folks. They wanted me to meet them, and one was a real pretty girl, but I didn't know that my neighbor had knew her, and he says, "Oh, she is so easy." Well, I couldn't even kiss her. She wanted to marry me, and so she was a stinker. Anyway, on one of our dates, we used to roller skate 3 or 4 days a week, and I couldn't afford to keep up my car. The lights were hanging out in the front, the lens were gone, and it was a beater. And we almost got caught by a railroad train once, and I just beat it. And, we went to Elk River, was the town next to us, about 8-10 miles away. And but we used to do a lot of roller skating together, and we were pretty good at it. It was, affordable in those days. It was, you had your own skates. And then she, on one date, my brother took me home, my half-brother Delbert, and he was dating a girl that Phyllis Porter was best friend of Lorraine's, and they took me to the farmhouse. I don't know what they did after that, but Lorraine kissed me. Oh boy, that was a big deal. She doesn't probably admit to it, but she was the aggressor. And she kissed me in the back seat of the Model A. That we were really living high on a Model A. That was my brother's car, and so speaking of Model A's, my older brother had a Model A also, and he would see how fast he could go. That's He's a wild one and heavy drinker. And he go down the gravel road slewing to see how fast we could go without tipping. And you can go about 30 miles an hour without tipping. And in those days, the arm went down on the door, and I fell out the front door, and the car ran over me, and the back tires ran over me. That's maybe why I got a lot of hip problem today. I don't know. But there again is times I could have been killed. And
Tell me a little bit about each of your daughters.
We were married after, we're getting ahead of ourselves again because we dated for several years, and then I was called up into the service, and we were going steady when I was engaged in the service, while I was in the service. And I left on New Year's, just after Christmas, in 1942, I think it was. And I was shipped to Africa. I went to Iran first, and then I went to Casablanca, and then I went from there with a ship called the Sabisky. And it was a shock to see how the different world that Africa was. Just unbelievable how the outside meat markets and the meat crawling with cockroaches and how they lived, how they worked for wheeling coal for a nickel a day, and we'd throw pennies or dimes and so on in between the ship and the dock and their pier, and they'd risk their lives diving down to get that money in between the ship. You know, only 3 or 4 feet, and I was smart enough. I sold my mattress cover. I feel guilty about it now, but I sold my mattress cover for $20, and I never spent a cent of money ever. When I was overseas, I got cigarettes for 50 cents a carton, sold them for $5 a pack to the foreigners, and boy, you could sell anything that you had. They had nothing over there. It's another world. You'd think it was 2,000-3,000 years. They hadn't changed a bit, not from what it was 2,000-3,000 years ago. And I was amazed at the stone buildings, mud and brick, and cobblestone streets. Just like it was history. Learned a lot. And then when I shipped from Iran, they had what they called Gurkhas. They had hired them as they were just a savage type of people. They had bones in their nose, big tribe marks cut in their face, and bones in their ears, and they big long sabers. They curved saber, and vicious people. And I did talk to our lieutenant, and they were on the pier waiting to load in the ship, and I thought, oh my God, they're not going to let those people on our ship, are they? Apparently they didn't, because we didn't see them, but the ship's food was, we called it airplane bread because there were so many bugs in the bread that you couldn't eat it, and the food was like slop. So we broke into the hold after a couple of days. We stole sea rations, and we ate sea rations, which will burn your belly out after a month or two. And But anyway, we ran into a storm going across Iran to Italy, and there was 40, 50-foot wakes. You could see the stern and the screws from the ship at the same time, and then all of a sudden the ship would go down and you couldn't even see it. And that was that bad of wakes. I maybe it might have been 60 feet, but we weren't allowed up on deck. But I went up on deck anyway. I thought, if I'm going to swim for it, because we lost 2 ships, and we had dirigible balloons attached to the ship because of plane strafing, and the balloons blew down. They had to cut them to let them go because it was that bad a storm, and the people were seasick. Oh, half the guys were. And then we landed in Italy on a boat that was sunk. We landed on the side of it, and then they transported us from there into another ship, and that had landing boats and so on and so forth, LCIs and LCTs, landing craft tank and landing craft infantry. And there's about maybe 50 of us in a landing boat at a time. And they had huge outboard motors. I never seen anything like that. They must have been 100 horse or 50 and 10 feet tall. They had shafts on them 10 feet tall, and we went over the side of the ship, one nets and onto the landing craft, and they were shelling the landing craft as we went in, and I got wet, but they didn't hit us. I was very fortunate. The shell exploded close, but they weren't direct hit. They did get some, but anyway, when I did get landed, we had to wade to our waist in the water up to the landing, and then I looked up and I saw a Stuka dive bomber, and I saw the night white puffs of smoke. I thought, boy, that is really pretty. And he was strafing the beach, and I didn't realize that. Well, that's nothing, he's a mile away, and but I laid down. I was smart enough to do that, and because everybody else was, and I got up and looked around, and the guy behind me was dead. I thought, oh boy, that scared the hell out of me here. I know it scared me more than the landing, and you know what I was hiding by is an ammunition dump. Somebody had already unloaded the ammunition, and if the shell would have hit that ammunition, it would have happened. But anyway, we went
Now, what beach were you on when you landed?
Anzio.
That was Anzio, okay.
Yeah, and we went in from Anzio, and we went towards Rome, and I'm just thinking that the terror from then on was just unbelievable for months. The shelling, and we attacked into one area, and then we pulled back and attack into another. And one we went in area, our own Air Force bombed ahead of us, and then the wind was blowing towards us, and the second wave of airplanes bombed in the no man's land, and the third bombed us. And some of the guys, the shock was so great, turned their stomachs upside down. It killed a lot of our own men. But then we attacked again, and we came to a stop, and they sent me out on a patrol. See where the Germans were. To get killed is what they really wanted to see. When you got killed, they know where the Germans were. And I and another guy, and that was my first experience on killing anybody. But first they said, keep down, the Navy's going to shell. And they shell at full bore at 16 inches. And that's 2 powder rounds with about a 500-pound shell, I think. That was about midnight. They said it's going to shell at midnight, and at midnight we were crouched down deep in our hole, and it almost pulled you out of the hole of the sound of the shells. It just, and there was a road, there was trees, there was houses, there was ditches. After they shelled, there was nothing but it looked like moon. It looked like the moonscape. There was 25-foot holes, 25 feet deep, and nothing after that. It was just unbelievable that anybody could ever live through that. And then we were sent out as a patrol, and I and another guy, and so we went out maybe a quarter mile, and we dug in, and I was too stupid. This is a way to get killed, a good way to get killed. And that happened to me several times. I was point man on patrol, and 2 Germans. Well, first there was a tank that came down, circling in between the holes, a German tank, and there must have been somebody out with a bazooka that on the other side of the road that used to be there, and they blasted the tank, and it caught on fire, and I was pretty close to the road, and only one German came out of the tank, and I blasted him, and I couldn't believe how a tank will burn. They just, the grease and stuff on them must, well, only one guy came out, and he was dead. Then another night or two, we were there for 4 days, and I didn't have any food. We were out of food for 4 days. And the third night, 2 Germans came down the road walking as patrol, just like we were. Only we were stopped and looking at a hole, or looking from our hole, and they were exposed. And so I tried to tell him to give up and halt and give up, but one guy, it was so dark, but I could see his arm went up with a potato masher. That's a hand grenade. It looks like a potato masher. They did, a wood one with a wood handle, and he was going to throw it, and so I emptied my gun into him. And I told the other guy, stupid people that you're with, and to get the right one, and I'd get the left one. And I looked down after I emptied my gun, and he's in the bottom of the hole, crouched down. He didn't want to get killed, and I had a good notion to kill him. But then I had a grenade, so I threw the grenade at the other one, and I thought I got him, but apparently not, because the next day they shelled that area that we were in, and there was no Americans there, but they shelled that whole area behind us just left and right, and the stupid guy was kind of kneeling up because it wasn't, and they spotted us, and they threw a mortar, a mortar about the third round, you could put it right into a hole. Well, they missed us maybe about that far. But anyway, that night, that afternoon, evening, we went back because we couldn't go anymore without food. So we went back, and here the outfit was going to pull out. And didn't contact. Well, of course, they didn't know where we were. But anyway, we borrowed some food from guys, and I cut my lips because I lost my my spoon and can opener and so on. And we did pull out of there after that. But
What didn't you tell me a story one time of your friend thought he got shot, and it was
that was on another attack.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that one that was the last big one I was in, and that lasted for about a month at least. The Rangers had been killed, all but 4, and a whole battalion of Rangers, and we attacked that, and they had shelled us. You talk about being scared. Oh God, as a kid you are just in shell shock most of the time. But into a barrage that they threw at us. We're laying on the ground, and 2 of our guys got up, and they lost their mind. I said I'd rather lose an arm or a limb or a leg or something than ever have that happen to me, because you could do this with them, and they didn't know from nothing after the shelling stopped, and right up during the barrage they got up and walked out. And didn't know where they were going, but they couldn't take it anymore. And anyway, I got to a spot where there was a haystack, and a German had previously been there. So I got in on the haystack where to try and keep warm, because it was cold. It was snow on the ground, and my feet had been wet up to my waist where we crossed creeks and so on and so forth. And in those days, they didn't have, all they had is a wool overcoat to keep you warm, and nothing else, and your uniform. That was it. And we weren't equipped the way we should have been by any means. And so after the haystack, we had a short rest there, and then we pushed on again, and it wasn't, maybe we heard a shot, and then here comes about 200 or 300 guys with their hands up. They were all Polish, and they shot the German guy. They had a SS officer as their commander, and the rest of them were all forced into the army. And so I had orders to take no prisoners, but I wasn't going to kill that many people. I mean, 1 or 2 might have been all right, but a couple hundred, I haven't got that much ammunition to start with. So the guy that came past me, walked past me with his hands up, he smiled at me, and I smiled at him, because he was all mud and I was all mud. And I was glad I didn't shoot him, because he is forced into service just like all the rest of them were. But I thought that was pretty fantastic. But when we got up to where the paratroopers were, they had picked up a lot of the bodies, but most of them were still there, or a lot of them were still there, and all their guns and everything was still there. And I picked out a guy that had he had lain in the hole, and he had a bullet hole right through the helmet, and he had his 45 out, and he was he's killed just the way he was shooting and laying. And I thought that's about the bravest act I've ever seen. He really fought to the end, and so I dragged him out, and I dug the hole bigger, and it was right on the top of a cliff, kind of a knoll, a big knoll, and there was a creek down below, and that's where we made our stand. There's probably 1,000 of us, but the guys weren't very smart. It's so miserable, the weather. Halfway up the water, you'd sit in water. Every time you dug a hole, the water would come up halfway. And so I cut in shelves to put my ammunition and guns and so on, because I collected a lot of guns. I had a P-38 and a 45 caliber pistol, and Thompson submachine gun, and I had an 03. I collected all the rifles because mine was jamming half the time. The mud and the rain and the snow, and it was just unbelievable rotten weather. And we had a tank down across the creek of the knoll. They used 88 millimeters, and they were firing at us constantly. And so they got smart. They started shooting aerial bursts because we were dug in pretty well. And so they, fire so the shell would explode up above you. So that night I went out and got a lot of, put the bayonets on the rifles and made a big machine gun nest. So, and I put the bags that they had on top of me, and so the aerial burst couldn't get me. And they had shelled for night and day for several weeks. Didn't let up at all. To give you an example, I lost 45 men out of a 12-man squad. They told me I was a group leader. There was a situation where we were getting replacement troops all the time. And I got a young guy that we hadn't slept in several weeks. And we were just all dog-tired, and he was a fresh recruit, so I said, I'm going to put you out to watch about 50, 100 feet ahead of us on the slope, just to stay awake where the rest of us can get some sleep. And lo and behold, I went to sleep. I mean, I slept right in the rotten water and the mud and everything. And it's kind of unbelievable. Well, what happened? The kid got killed that night. He got his throat slit. He fell asleep. And I thought the Americans were paying these guys that with the long curved swords 2 cents an ear for German ears. And they'd scare the hell out of you. They'd feel your helmet, and if you had the curve in your helmet like a German has, you were dead. And so they were what you'd call the night fighters. That's what they mostly did. And anyway, after a couple of weeks, it was about 3 or 4 weeks, the Germans made an attack. They had 3 divisions to our 1. And if you look down and see the amount of Germans coming, it just scared the shit out of you. To be perfectly honest. 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old, you don't want to die. Your life is so important. But they, on their final attack, they were thousands of Germans coming down to us, but they were lower than we were. And I got 1 night of rest in that 2 months. They put me out behind 105 artillery piece. They let me sleep under that. Can you imagine that, sleeping? Well, anyway, I must have looked a terrible mess because I dirtied in my pants. I didn't dare get out of the hole. Leaked in my pants, and so he put a sulfa pill in the water, drank right out of the hole because I had run out of water. And so to give you a little idea of what living hell is. And when they, I was shooting as fast as I could shoot. But one gunner after another would jam up on me. I used the 03 and the Springfield 03, and the M1 jammed on me. The Thompson machine gun was okay, but use up the ammunition fast on those. And until the Germans got down to the creek below us, and then our own artillery opened up. I had no idea that there was that many artillery shells. Oh my God, it was just like the world had turned upside down. They, that whole German force was just, it was just like the whole land was on fire. The ground and trees and everything was just disappearing. And they didn't let up for a minute. They just pounded and pounded and pounded them. And after that happened, they probably shelled for 2 or 3 hours. Then all of a sudden, just on the creek, all the way across the creek from up to the sky, there was about that wide. It was just like a plastic glass had raised up to the sky and down to over the other end of the creek. So it was just like it was a shield. And I thought I had lost my mind. I thought that can't be. And I asked the other guys, do you see that? And they said it must be from the shelling, the heat waves from the shelling. I said, no, it's more than that. And you know we never lost another man that day? It wasn't over, but we never, and the Germans just disappeared. They, there was at least 2,000 of them, and they just disappeared. I don't know where they went. There was an awful lot of them dead, I know that. But I burned up my guns, the BARs. You know what a BAR is? A Browning automatic rifle. And they held a 20-shot clip. And I had burned up just about every gun I had. And I couldn't believe that. I thought, well, I knew we were going to die when the Germans come, that many against us. I had no idea that we had that much artillery behind us, but I knew I was going to die, and I thought the guy I pulled out of the hole, at least I'm going to take as many as I can with me. And uh, it was just unbelievable that wall of glass. I don't know what it was glass. It looked like glass to me, and it was thick enough that no bullet would go through it. And because it had edges on it, I've seen heat waves before and shock waves from artillery, but it wasn't like that at all. And this was a solid glass, a foot thick, and definite edges on it, way up. And I thought, oh boy. And I didn't know how to pray, but I was sure praying. I'd never gone to church, only to a Christmas pageant once. My family was Catholic, and that's the only time I'd ever been in church, but I didn't. When you get out there alone, you have no one, like I've said this before, that you have no one that you can count on. You are alone. No husband, no friend, no wife, no girlfriend, no nothing. You have met your maker, and you don't have any other way to go. Whoever said there was no way, some foxholes was telling it the truth. At least at the time. A lot of them don't remember. I did. Anyway, there was an intermittent shelling the next day, and several days after, we held out. I got the Bronze Star for holding out there, because not a lot of men died.
Did you say they could have given the Purple Heart too?
Well, I turned that down because I saw men with their arms and legs and shot off, their stomachs shot, and you get the red light blinking, and I mean it's on, and
We got about 2 minutes left on the tape.
okay. Well, in any case, I was partially covered. Three guys came and dug in by me, and I said, "Don't do that! Don't do that! Don't do that! Don't spread out! Don't get too close together." And the Germans got field glasses. I knew that, and they plopped the shell right into their hole and blew half their bodies on me and everything. You talk about fear, scared. You can't ever get over it. And so many things like that happened. Dumb guys. I couldn't believe though how some of the Americans were bloodthirsty. They see a watch or teeth or any gold teeth, they'd collect the bags of them. These guys from Alabama and the hills are just something else. They were terrorists, I'll tell you. I didn't know Americans could be like that, but to preserve yourself, I can see shooting anybody, but not mutilating them after they're dead. Before I forget it, I wanted to tell you on another attack, because it wasn't all serious. I was sent on a patrol on another guy. They said Germans had a new gas mask and they wanted to test it, but I knew what they were doing. They were just wanted to get killed or shot up to see where the Germans were. And so I and a guy named Witt, he's a big, tall, ugly guy, but he was my friend, and we went out maybe a quarter mile or something, and we could hear the Germans talking. And so we went carefully up a hill, but they were on another side of the hill, and then they were singing German songs, and we knew they were camped. And we got up the hill, and it was about midnight, and then 3 bell flares were shot up by, I suppose, the Americans. I don't know if it was German or Americans now, because they had bell flares too. And we were caught up on the hill, and I thought we were behind rocks, because at night the grass looks like it grows at different heights, and it looked like we were behind rocks. And so I thought, this is a good hiding place. And all of a sudden we hear a fruit, fruit. That's the way the German machine guns were, very, very fast shooting. And Wood says, I'm hit. And I said, oh, how can you be hit behind the rocks? We're really very safe here. And he said, no, feel my legs. And they were all wet. And so I have dragged him off the hill, and I had to drag him, because if we'd have stood up, they'd have saw our forms with the bell flares. And so I dragged him, and he was hurting so. And when we got down below the hill, we got up, and I was holding him and carrying him on my shoulder, and we got back, and then we to the command post, where there was always a command post where they sent us out from, and he had 2 or 3 holes through his canteen, and and the ribbon that he got is just unbelievable. And I was swearing at him, here I was all ready to get out my sulfaphenildamide and so on and so forth, which I used quite often, because I got to be quite a medic. One guy was taking a dump outside the hole, and an artillery shrapnel got him in the butt, and he dove into the hole without being finished. And I got the shrapnel out and put sulfaphenildamide on it, because we all carried that, and patched him up. And that was another funny one, that you don't have, the worst thing I missed was toilet paper, because on the farm we never had toilet paper. At least we had a book, but out there you have nothing but grass. It's terrible. And,
So after the war, then you came home and married Grandma? Is that?
oh yeah, after the war, I was sent to. I should tell you. They said anybody found with weapons can't go home, and so as big as your house, there was a pile of weapons out of 6,000 guys. There's a pile of weapons as big as your house. And I had a P-38, that's a German pistol, and I had a 45, American 45, and I had a Thompson submachine gun. I had grenades. I had Beretta. I was a walking arsenal. And I threw them all, and I wasn't going to take any chances not getting home. So, and I was stupid, because the other guys had cut their canteens out the bottom and carried their guns inside and everything, and their barracks bags and so on. But I'll know the next time if there is one. But anyway, when I got home, I was shipped to Texas in a prison camp as a guard in a prison camp, and I told Lorraine to come down with me, get married down there, and so she did. And I wasn't, while she was coming down, too many German prisoners got shot by American guards that had just come back from overseas. You don't put guys that have been shooting at Germans all day long and all night long in a prison guard. They found that out in a hurry. So I was transferred after a month or two to a Fort Ellington, the Air Force base. And I got lots of stories I could tell you about being a guard too. I used to, the SS had to be kept separate from the regular Germans because they'd kill each other left and right. Because the regular German people were pretty nice guys, but the SS were fanatics just like the Arabics are now. And we were in machine gun towers around the compound, and the SS had tried to get into where they were playing soccer or something with the other ones, and I'd fire a few rounds ahead of him, and he'd get caught in the fence, and then I'd fire a few rounds with the machine gun on the left, and he'd get his shirt caught in the fence, and I'd blast around him. And one guy fell asleep in the towers, and he sprayed the barracks. He heard a German shooting, and he fell asleep, and he grabbed the machine gun and let go. And he got 7 Germans. That's when we got transferred. They were found, you know, over the tripwire or something, because they had a tripwire over the big fence, and you got over that, you were dead. But in any case, I got transferred from there to the military police, and I got into mob fights, and I used a slapjack and a blackjack. Well, I almost got court-martialed for one. I was going to kill a man. I was beating him up. He resisted arrest, and I was beating him so bad. I was fully intended to kill him, but my other MPs, we always walked in groups. The other MPs pulled me off, and the commander called me in the next day, and he said, "You got 57 stitches in that guy. What happened?" And I said, "He resisted arrest." And I was wearing my combat badge. So they said that's enough. So they put me on guarding American prisoners at Ellington Air Force Base. Those guys refused to go in, and I could drill people just standing still. I'd stand in the shade and I'd drill them in the sun, and I just hated them because of what I'd just been through, and they knew smarter than I was not to go. But I'd drill them until the printer fell down. I could drill fast. And I got a commendation for excellence with how I handled the American prisoners. And some of them, you know, threatened to fight me, and I said, "Oh boy, I told them right where I live." I said, I'll be glad to. I wasn't afraid of anybody or anything. But we did get into military police into mob fights in Texas. It was wonderful, though. The people appreciated a soldier. I couldn't pay for a movie. I couldn't pay for a meal. It was really very nice. You didn't ever have to worry about hitching a ride to any place. Everybody on the road, even I rode cattle trucks 700 miles to see Lorraine, because I was transferred. Well, she was in San Antonio, so. But we were married down there, and
Then you had Diane.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we were living above a garage. Big cockroaches, they were that big. And you couldn't get a place to save your life, but this guy, taxi driver, told us of this woman that had a garage for rent, and so he took us there, and that was really close to the harbor in Houston, and so we were married there, and the first month, I got to tell you about this, is she was crying when I had to hitchhike, all the way from Ellington Field to Houston, and she had her period the first month we were married, and I said, "Oh, we'll take care of that," and I did the next month. She was so happy to be pregnant, and we got everything for Diane that you could imagine. And she was born during a hurricane. The trees were like 60, 80 miles an hour wind or more, and we said, "Oh, we're never going to have any others," because she had suffered with the birthing pains, but then she was so cute that it wasn't very long we decided to have another one. So it was really wonderful. We bought so much stuff for her, and I didn't want to get out of the service because I was making combat pay, base pay, separate quarters, separate rations, until they forced me out. I was making as much as a lieutenant, and so many things were free. Like I say, you couldn't buy a meal. Their restaurants were wonderful. They appreciated the service person, and then I got transferred from the Ellington to a train guard, and I would take as much as 100 prisoners out in the woods at a time when I was a guard. It was misting one day, and some SS guy didn't want to go out. He mentioned the Geneva Convention to me, and I said, "You start running USOB," only it wasn't SOB. And he said, what? And I said, "You're gonna get shot escaping." Oh, he looked at my badge. He knew that I'd just come from overseas, and he changed his mind in a hurry. The guy went out hunting. But the regular Germans were really nice people. I used to shoot squirrels and wild hogs and everything in the woods, and they'd get $1 a day. 50 cents went to savings, and 50 cents they could do what they wanted with, and they would cook the squirrels and stuff out in the woods, and none of them ever tried to escape. They really enjoyed working. In fact, many German prisoners came back here after the war. They thought, what a wonderful place, but the Gestapo were just like the Arabics are now, the fanatics. But my attitude in those days were, you kill or be killed, and nobody pushes anything over on you. You learn that. Your training is all that. You don't don't take anything from anybody. And so now that I'm a Christian, I realize how bad my attitude was, but it was self-preservation, I didn't know anything about Christ or anything. I was never brought up in the church at all. I'd went to church a few times with Lorraine, Methodist church, but I had not that many times, and so I didn't know much about Christ. And I'm sorry to say, but it's been a great effect on my life since, is the balance of good and evil. I'm sorry for a lot of attitude I had, but it was self-preservation. Anyway, we got on the train and came home to Minnesota after all that. We were so anxious to show our baby, and I had an opportunity to make $10,000 a year, which was big money in those days, to go to South America on an oil program, but I'm so glad I didn't. I found the people don't live very long. The snakes and stuff in South America, just unbelievable. The mosquitoes and so on. The guys don't live too long down there. So I'm glad I turned that down. I would have taken it, but because I wasn't afraid of anything. But we wanted to show Diane off, though. She saved our lives in a way, too. But when I got back to Minnesota, being so poor, well, I had never spent a penny of my money in all the whole time I was over there. So I got paid for all the time I was there. So I bought a house in Highland Park for, I had saved over $1,000, which was a lot of money in those days. And I bought a house that was already built, and so we put in a big garden, and I built a garage, a big double garage.
And you had Donna and Terry there too?
And I had Donna and Terry there, yeah. And in those days, I bought a 36 Dodge for $400. That was a lot of money. It had the canvas top. That was pretty. The big white sidewall tires yet, in those days. And, but it ran pretty good. I bought it from a guy named Merle Bantworth. He's from Minoga. And from then on, I got my first job at Northern Woods, where I didn't have a car yet when we got home. And I had a bicycle that I rode to work summer and winter, 20 below or whatever, to work. I think it was $2 a day. And of course I worked so hard, I got a raise quite quickly, and I worked hard. I worked there for a few years until I could afford a car. And Lorraine had never driven a car, so that was the first car she drove, and I couldn't handle it. It was a stick shift, and I'd take her out on the road in front of our house. That's on the second nine of the golf course now. And grind, crunch, you have the clutch and the gas and the so on. And the shift, you gotta be synchronous. And I couldn't, 2 blocks I got out of the car and I said, "Here, you take it, you drive." she come back, she got pretty good. She just kept practicing, and she got pretty good, and that's how she learned to drive. But I couldn't handle
They have food over there ready for us. So do you want to wrap it up by asking something?
Just ask him whatever you want to ask.
No, I'm just trying to think of how you want to end it. What would you like to pass on?
Sure.
What would you like to pass on to your children and grandchildren? What
and great grandchildren.
and great grandchildren?
Oh, I was so very, very fortunate. The Lord has been extremely good to both of us. I have 3 wonderful, wonderful girls. I couldn't ask for any better. And they're all Christians. And they've had an effect on their children. And I'm sure their children are going to have an effect on their grandchildren. And so it's I couldn't ask any more out of life than it's been. It's been hard in coming up from nothing to successful, I would say, a very successful life. The Lord has looked out for us in many, many cases. I should have been dead hundreds of times, and I'm still here. I've had horrible operations, and I've come through all of them with just faith. And it's so wonderful knowing that you've got somebody looking out for you. That somebody is Christ. So in my case, that you don't have too long I've got left, but I have no regrets of the wonderful life we've had. We've been boating and skiing and sliding and snowmobiling and camping and saw the mountains and been pretty much all over the United States and lived in the South and lived in the North, and we loved it all. And wherever we've been, it's we're comfortable now because of, I think, of what we came up from nothing to be something and to do something, and that's the most success of our lives. It wasn't money, it's the love and care that we got from everyone. So we're very happy. Is that enough?
That's good. That's good. Let's wrap it up.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, Grandpa.